Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to askNK. So just like I promised, we're going to be reviewing and taking a look at the new features that have made their way to Keyshot 9. And Keyshot 9 is the recent installment of Keyshot as at November 2019. So there is a couple of features that have made their way to Keyshot, and we're going to look at them, look at the pros, the cons, the things that have changed and things that haven't changed and things that we wish to actually have in another installment or in an update that has to do with Keyshot. So first things first, if you take a look at the UI, you're going to find out that there is basically no huge change. Actually, there is basically no change at all. So you only find out that we now have 5 new buttons. And now this 5 new buttons has to do with one, which you're going to be able to find here for the tools. We now have the DENOISE button. We also have another button here that has to do with GPU. If you have multi GPUs, you'll find there is a third button. Right now, we don't have that. And we now have a brand new one here, which links us to the KeyVR. Now, KeyVR is a brand new set of tools that has been made available by the guys at Luxion that you can use to actually view your models and, play with them in VR. So let's talk about the GPU, which is the elephant in the room. So the GPU is one of the big features that has been announced, and by a long shot, this is going to actually increase productivity and change the way you work. So for us to get this, let me just switch this over to the default tab. So switching this over to the default tab, you're going to find the 5th UI element here, which is the models. So the models now has to do with models that you can get from Keyshot Cloud. So if you want to access the Keyshot Cloud, you can click over here and then you can go to the cloud library, and from the cloud library you'll be able to actually download Keyshot materials and also cloud. Now this cloud library exists with Keyshot 8, but the cool thing with this new version is that for the new version you can now download your models directly from the cloud. So these models you have here, you can download them and they really download pretty fast. So with this ready, let's just simply go ahead and test out some of the models we had pre-downloaded to actually play with this. So with this directly in our scene, we can just simply manipulate around this and see what we want. Now, one other cool thing to notice is in the previous version of Keyshot, which is Keyshot 8 and Keyshot 8.1, you might have to right click, edit the model and do some of this, interesting stuff with them. But now there is a brand new tool window. So the tool window or the tool menu or the tool button, it links you up with all of the things that you would want to do within your edit geometry window. So now if you want to move this, you don't necessarily need to come over here. You can now have the move tool here, which is a universal move tool. You can also edit the normals, retessellate your model, especially if you're coming with a low resolution model. You can close your models in case they have holes. You can split these models apart and you can separate objects when you have models that have independent objects combined as one piece. At the same time, you can have access to the material template and you can also import other materials using this. So if you want to bring in a substance material, you can bring that here. You can also bring in your Keyshot material from here. Now there's also 2 cool buttons you're also going to find here. Now this has to do with the set camera and also the perspective match. We're going to take a look at the perspective match very soon, but then let's just talk about the set camera. So if you have a new camera here, I'm not talking about the free one. If you create a brand new camera, and you can see like right now, we can literally move our camera to different points, okay? We can move our camera to different points in space. We don't really have a target as it stands. All right, so we don't have a target. You can see that happening now. But if you want to have a target for your camera, click here and set target. You can choose to set a certain point as your target. You can choose to set a certain part of your model as your target, or you can just simply select the entire model itself and set it as your target. And to me, this is something really cool that would greatly, increase the way you kind of navigate directly inside here. Another thing to note is with the new Keyshot that we have here, since we already have this model, we can test out the GPU. So you might have noticed that the GPU here is grayed out. The GPU is grayed out because we don't have an updated driver for our NVIDIA card. So if your NVIDIA is updated, of course you're going to find the GPU all turned on. But either ways, there are ways you can turn this GPU on. Right now you can see that directly here, the ray tracing is happening really fast actually, even without the noise turned on. And this is one of the huge improvements to Keyshot 9 that I really like. You don't necessarily need to turn on the noise for some certain situations, and some situations actually warrant you to turn on the noise. We're going to talk about the noise very soon. So for you to get your GPU turned on, you can actually get that happening by clicking over to render. And when you come over here, you're going to notice of GPUs that you have, and you can turn on the GPU mode by just clicking on this button right here. So once you turn it now, you can notice automatically that the GPU has been selected. So with the GPU selected, you can also come back here and you can turn it off. Now, if you have your drivers updated and installed, you don't necessarily need to do that. All right, you don't necessarily need to do this. You can just simply, turn this on from here. There's also a short hack to how this thing works. If you turn off the performance mode and turn it back on, you now see that the GPU comes on. I don't know. This is just something that exists, and I think you can, make use of it if you want to. So now we can see the GPU. Everything is working really, really fast. I mean, even without the GPU turned on, you can actually see that you're having a very nice ray tracing results happening. So if we turn on the GPU, let's see what's going to happen. All right, we don't necessarily see so much of a change, but then it goes a long way to tell you how much these guys have worked around the rendering capability from both the CPU and the GPU. So I'm just going to select this object one more time and just select the move tool, and let's just move this object to base. Okay, let's just get it down there and simply click on OK. So I think it's a little bit too low, so I'm just going to get this all the way up about this point and click OK. So with this happening here, let's try out and see what happens with the denoise. For this, I'm going to turn off the GPU and I'm going to just simply hit denoise and let's see. So we'll give it a very small okay, fine. I didn't even get to do the countdown, and you can see we're having some very interesting thing happening here. So if you're using something that has to do with an RTX, or you're using a 1080, or maybe you're using an 8 gig, of course you're going to get faster results. And to me, this is very, very impressive. The fact that we're just using the CPU and not the GPU, and we're getting a denoise feature happening in real time is just amazing. So I will try out something else, because I kind of think that maybe this just works for normal surfaces. So I'm just going to drag in here. I'm going to drag in here a very simple glass. So we already downloaded this glass earlier. So I'm going to drag this in. And for this, I would actually come through and scale this. Okay, that's fine. So what I want to do is I want to put the denoise to a very good test. All right. So I want to see if it's going to denoise properly with caustic turned on. I think it's actually good to, try this thing. They had a lot of claims about this, so let's just put them to the test, shall we? Select the entire geometry. So I want to get those refractions happening. I think we're selecting the wrong one. So I'm going to select that one more time. And let me just bring this around here. All right, and click OK. Let's rotate this. Okay, now we're going to see the real magic. At the same time, I think it's also good to turn on the GI, because I actually want to see some very interesting effects. I want to see if this is okay. GI is turned on already. All right, this happens really fast. Okay, so I'm going to increase the GI bounce. Let's make that 6. And at the same time, let me turn on caustic and let's see if the guys from Luxion actually have a very good claim to what they've proposed. And this is really cool. So I'm also going to select the material, and let's take a look at the material. We have a very nice refraction index, which is good. Let me see what we can do. I'm just going to play with this a little bit more, and let's see what we can have. I just want to push this a little bit more and see what we can get, if the denoise feature is happening for real, or maybe if it's some gimmick. And let's see, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and there you go. It's that fast. Is that fast? So from me to the guys at Luxion, thumbs up. You guys did something really impressive with this, and I'm very, very happy to be able to play with this tool. And at the same time, if you want to play with this tool, you want to get a copy of this, link to where you can find this is going to be in the description, so you can check that out. Now let's play with something else that these guys have claimed to have created. So it is something called the realcloth. So realcloth is actually something that would help you work faster. So imagine that you're working in things like Marvelous Designer and all that stuff, and you're creating some amazing piece of geometry, some good apparel, and you want to texture this apparel. You want to get the best quality out of it. If you're doing this texturing in other 3D apps, you will definitely hit some hitches. So they have created something called realcloth, and realcloth is a material that you can simply, just click, drag and drop, and you're going to get the fabric, you can get the fold, you can get all of the, all of the weaving thing that happens directly on your clothes. So instead of spending so much time or maybe going to Houdini, trying to craft this thing out, trying to find some alphas that you're going to use to get the perfect stuff directly from ZBrush over to here, you just throw this and automatically you're going to have this very cool effect. And can you guys see that immediately I drop this, before completing the statement, the whole denoising effect has happened. So you can apply realcloth here, and the realcloth seems to be really, really cool. So you can throw this in, you can change this how you want, you can go over to the materials, let's double click this and go over to the materials. You can change every single thing that happens here. And this is cool. This is really cool. So if you have a UV object, you can turn on the UV from here and it's going to align properly. And if you don't have that, of course, you can just simply turn this on. A much more detailed video about all of these things are coming very soon, so keep an eye open for that. And at the same time, if you want to create things like fibers on top of your geometry, let's say you want to create like hair looking fibers, all of those nice stuff that you would like to see when you actually making some simulations for clothes, you can do that here. And these flyaway fibers are just directly here. So we can increase the density if we want to see them more. We can increase the radius, or we can reduce the radius of what we want. At the same time, you can do all of these things. You can make the cloth transparent. And if you take a look at the screen, you'll notice that all of the fibers that we're talking about, we cannot see them. Now, we can't see them because it is a geometry and you need to reevaluate the geometry in your scene for this to actually take effect. So I'm just going to click here and it's going to reevaluate, and you will see them directly here in our scene. Very, very cool stuff. Extremely cool stuff. All right, so the denoise feature is playing a huge role now, but then we'll begin to notice some, so we're noticing some very cool artifacts happening, some part looking washed out, but I think this denoise thing is happening directly on the viewport. So what we're going to do now is, after we've added the fibers, let's also take a look at a brand new material that's also made its way to Keyshot, and that is called the FUZZ. So the FUZZ is to simulate the idea of fibers. So if you just want to apply fibers, or you want to apply hair, or you want to apply things like grasses, all of those cool stuff, if you want to apply them directly onto a mesh and you don't want to use the realcloth, the guys at Luxion have made this very, very convenient. So imagine having this plane. So I'm just going to switch this from realcloth to flat, so you can see we have a plane like this, and I'm just going to reevaluate this right now, and we have a very flat plane. All right, I can switch this and select this green. I like this green, or maybe I like this green. I don't know the green I like. Okay, so we have something like this, simple, ready to go. Now imagine you want to add grasses, or you want to add FUZZ to this. The FUZZ itself is a geometry node that exists in the material graph. Okay, so now we have this material graph. Let me just centralize all of this. Now we have this material graph, and if you remember, in the previous version of Keyshot, which is Keyshot 8, if you right click and come over to geometry, you'll be able to find bubbles, displays, and also flakes. Now there is a FUZZ that exists here, and if you drag this FUZZ and drop it directly into the geometry, all right, you will see it working perfectly fine. So what we need to do now is just make sure that we reevaluate the geometry. So let's simply double click here and make some changes. We would like to get some variations, of course, and let's say the radius might be a little bit too much, but then let's just try this out first. And then for the density, we could make this density a little bit more, and we can scroll down and evaluate or execute the geometry node. So we looked at the radius earlier and said it was too much, and you can see that the radius is a bit too much. So we can tone this thing down and reevaluate this one more time, and you can start seeing what we have. All right, you can start seeing all of the interesting stuff that we have. So if you have a texture you want to use to drive the density, you have a texture you want to use to drive the length and the direction, you can plug in those things here. At the same time, just keep an eye open. We'll cover videos about this soon, so you can drive this and you can do that there. And let's say you don't have the time to play hanky-panky with this, you just want to throw in a good old-fashioned material and get busy. What you can do is you can come over to the FUZZ section here, and you can just simply pick any of this material and drop it directly onto your object. And so once you drop it directly onto your object, and let's just simply move this thing around, you will start noticing that we have this thing directly here. So you don't necessarily need to go through the whole material graph process, except you want to do some very precise material creation, all right? Except you have some very specific task you want to play with, then of course you can do that. All right, so now that we have this and it's working, let's take a look at the very third material type that has also made its way to Keyshot. So that is called the contour. So contour actually gives you an MPR style, or should I say an Illustrator style of rendering. So if I pick this and I drop this directly onto this object, you can see that we have all of these lines, okay? Now, the idea for this is not for you to replace your material with this, all right? The idea for this is for you to be able to select this object as it is. So I'm just going to double click to select this object, open up your material graph, drag this object in here and use it as a label, all right? So I can now connect this over to this place and use it as a simple label. So by just throwing this in as a label, you start noticing that we have this, these black lines traveling through. So if I come here and double click on this black line, I can increase the width of this line. I can increase the width of this line. And at the same time, I can do that with all of these other contours that exist here. So I can also double click over to this part that is called flat. I can change the color of this flat. So if I switch over to red, you will notice I have much more of a red line. If I switch this back to black, I have the black outline working here. So I'm just going to close this and rotate around. If for some reason you want to actually match your stuff, let's say you want to simply do a match perspective for whatever thing that you're working on, for example this plane, you can simply match your perspective. So for you to match perspective, let me get rid of this so that we can have a simple plane. You would need a backdrop, all right? You cannot match your perspective without a backdrop, or a backplate, sorry. So you need a backplate. So you need a backplate to match your perspective. So you can just simply drag and drop a backplate like this, and you can notice that we have our object just hovering like this, having so much fun. You could easily eyeball this if you want, all right? You can easily eyeball this if you want. But then if you want to get a much more precise matching, especially if you're doing product rendering and all that stuff, you need to come here and turn this on. So by simply turning this on, you will be able to have access to the Y axis, which you can position properly. You also have access to the X axis, which you can also position properly. So if you drag this over here, and let's say we drag this over here, you have access to the X axis, which you can position properly, and at the same time you have access to the Z axis. So with all of these axes you have here, you can now have a much more precise matching of your backplates, all right? So I'm just going to position this here. You can now have a much more precise matching of your backplates over to your model, or you can now have a much more precise matching of your model on your backplate. So this would help you, get things working properly. So if I just move this back to this point, you can now see I have this here. So in some cases you might need this, in some cases you might not need this. But I really wish that they had the whole dimension kind of effect. Like in dimension, there is just one button. It takes a look at the entire backplate that you have. But I really wish they had the whole dimension magic button that just takes a look at the backplate and gives you the best result. So let's take a look at something else. And what we're looking at next is the animation. So I'm just going to get rid of this backplate. So let's get rid of the backplate by simply coming over here and taking this thing off. So the next cool feature that we have here with this brand new version of Keyshot is the animation. All right, so there is a brand new animation curve. So if you've never used animation curve or graph editor before, you probably have no idea what you're missing from. So with Keyshot adding this here, it is going to make it even way more easier, extremely easy for you to control your animation. In the previous versions of Keyshot, you couldn't really control your animation that much, right? So how you can do that is if you click here and you go over to this section where you have, the type of animation you want, all of those stuff, we can select part, all right? So you can select part, we can select dolly. All right, so let's play with dolly. So if we have dolly and we go next, we're going to select the camera which we want. If you don't have a camera, you can click on add to add a brand new camera. And then I can simply go over to next. And from next, I can choose what I want. So if I need this to be a linear animation, if I need it to be an ease in, ease out, ease in and out, I can get all of that happening. So if we click on custom part, you now notice that we have something really cool, which is this, the graph editor, the path editor. All right, so I'm going to simply click on finish, and we have this here. Nothing too fancy, but then of course let's go in and play with it. I kind of think that this is a little bit too much, so I'm just going to reduce the thickness. So I think the width seems to be a little bit too much and distracting, so I'm just turning that down. Okay, so with this here, I'm going to pick this and simply dock it directly here. So what I'm doing is I'm replacing what we had before. So I'm just replacing that, and I'm having that there. And you can simply switch in between these two. By default, the animation we have is just simply this, all right? You can see the camera traveling out. By default, this is what we have, okay? It looks good. You might like it, you might not like it. But then what if you can reverse this? What if you can change it? So what we can do now is I would like to simply use the curve to reverse this, okay? So I'm going to put this here, and I'm also going to put this here. So now with that reverse, you can now notice that we have a movement happening like this. At the same time, I don't like the fact that this is happening from a very far distance. So I'm going to use the curve to bring this closer to home, okay? I'm also going to use this to frame this. At the same time, I'm also going to use this Bezier handles that we have here, or the tangent handles as they're called, and I can use this to control how the flow of my animation is. Let's also frame this in. You can still use this to control the length of the animation. So this is actually an impressively cool feature, and we can frame this on, and we can frame this again, and at the same time we can still change this. I still want this thing to start a little bit closer. Yeah, maybe something like that. So we can frame this. If you want to zoom out, you can use the mouse wheel to zoom all the way out, and then you can frame this back again. You can get more space in case you're looking for more real estate you want to work with. You can get that there. And with this now, you can change how your animation works. So let me just simply drag this a little bit lower, and let's play this back and see what we have. All right. So you can see with the animation curve, we're having some sort of animation that doesn't really appeal to us. So I'm going to simply turn this down, and now by just simply changing the way the handles look or the way the handles behave, you can start getting some very cool result. All right, so if I want it to come a little bit too close, the more I pull this down, the closer it gets. So that's a little bit too close. So let's just simply frame in on this, zoom all the way out, and so I can pull this down just a little bit, frame in on this, zoom all the way out, and we can frame in on this just a little bit more. So you have basically endless possibilities when it comes to this. But there is also a couple of things that I really wish that they had. All right, one of the things I wish that they had here are maybe things like presets. All right, presets would be really nice to have. The retiming thing seems to work. I just think that there might be some easier ways that they can play with this tool and, you know, create something cool out of it. And speaking about playing with tools and creating cool stuff out of it, right now, if you want to render out your animation, you may probably want to preview it before you render. So there is now a brand new preview button that exists here. And once you click on the preview button, Keyshot will go all the way through from beginning to end and create a quick AVI preview that you can play with. So this is about it, and these are the cool features that have made their way to Keyshot. And my verdict is Keyshot is one of the best 3D programs that you can use for rendering out there. I've played with a whole lot of them, and the cool thing with the guys from Luxion is they continually kind of refresh this and try to make tools work a little bit better than, you know, than usual. There is a lot of updates that has made their way to this tool, and I also know that there is a couple of bug fixes that they've done. I'm particularly happy about the tools menu. I'm happy about the GPU, and it's actually some very nice improvements to actually see that the guys at Luxion, they do take feedback and they put those feedback into work. So if you want to get a copy of this tool, link is going to be in the description so you can get this. I'd like to know what you guys think about this in the comment section. And if you like this video, you know what to do. Go ahead and give it a like, and don't forget to turn on notification. And if you're new here, it's going to be amazing if you can hit the subscribe button and also turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video or the next update. And honestly, I see you guys again with a tutorial update. Free Friday, tutorial Tuesday, tips and tricks, things like this. Peace.